Today, we're telling the story of how a climb on Mount Everest turned into a living nightmare just 48 meters from the summit. Kenyan banker Joshua Cheruiyot Kirui took on the death zone without supplemental oxygen, but he tragically overestimated his own strength. The tragedy played out at a landmark known as Bishop Rock, when his guide, Nawang Sherpa, tried to save his dying client by fitting him with an oxygen mask. Joshua, delirious, physically resisted, pushing the help away. So, why did this successful strategist lose his mind? And why didn't his guide run for safety, instead choosing to stay and freeze to death beside him? To understand why he kept pushing upward when anyone else would have turned back, we need to rewind the clock 40 years. The scene changes. Instead of the icy silence of the death zone, we're in the humid air of Nandi County in western Kenya. Here, as one of many children in a large family, Joshua's obsession with climbing began almost at birth. His mother would watch in horror as her young son scrambled to the very tops of the tall cypress trees in their yard, scaring her half to death. He wasn't just playing. He was testing the limits of gravity itself. This inner rhythm, this drive to go faster, higher, also dictated his approach to school. Joshua never wasted a moment. His mind was like a well-oiled machine. In elementary school, he skipped a grade, passing his final exams at just 12 years old. His parents actually made him repeat the year, thinking he was still too young for boarding school. Later, at Chebisa's high school, academics became more of a challenge. His father was even called into the principal's office over his grades, but Joshua made his mark in other ways. At home, he was the only one of the children who wasn't afraid of the hard, grueling work on the farm. This farmer's grit, this habit of enduring hardship and working with his hands, would later become the very foundation for his survival at high altitudes. Let's fast forward to Nairobi in the 2010s. The Joshua we knew is gone. In place of the boy in the tree, we see a man in a perfectly tailored suit. He's a successful corporate banker at KCB Group, one of the largest financial institutions in the region. His office is a world of air-conditioned, cool and sterile order. To his colleagues, he's a classic introvert, quiet, reserved, completely absorbed in the world of numbers. He speaks very little and gives off the impression of a man who has everything neatly filed away. But it's the perfect camouflage, because inside this quiet banker lives a completely different person. The moment someone brings up mountains or trail running, this quiet banker is transformed. A fanatical gleam appears in his eyes, his voice grows stronger, and his enthusiasm becomes infectious. He begins to lead a full-blown double life. At home and at work, he's the reliable, calm Joshua. But in the mountaineering community, amidst the mud, sweat, and rock, he's known by his last name, Cheruiyot, the man with no limits. His family has no idea about the sheer scale of the risks their quiet son is taking. Some of them only find out about his incredible feats from the news. This duality even seeps into his life plan, a plan that now sounds like a cruel twist of irony. He was saving his real life for later, putting it away like money in a savings account. He would joke to his family in a line that would later become his epitaph. "First, I'll climb Everest, then I'll make my money, and only after that will I get married." He was convinced he could manage time, just like he managed his bank accounts. But mountains don't play by the rules of financial planning, and for him, the clock was already ticking. And then, in a single second, everything changes. This doesn't happen in some sterile office, under the hum of fluorescent lights. It happens out in the open, where the air smells of dust and freedom. The year is 2012. Joshua is on a work assignment at an outward bound center in Loitokitok, right on the border of Tanzania. He's standing at the foot of a giant, and the sight of it splits his life into a before and an after. Before him stands Kilimanjaro. The snow-white cap of Kibo Peak, hovering over the scorched savanna, hits him with the force of an electric shock. He isn't just admiring the view. In that moment, the composed banker is utterly consumed by the idea of climbing. The mountain bug gets into his bloodstream, and from then on, Joshua sees the world only through a vertical lens. By 2014, the incubation period for this obsession is over. Looking is no longer enough. He needs to feel the cold rock beneath his hands. Joshua dives into Nairobi's hiking community, searching for kindred spirits. His first proving ground is the Aberdare Range. Just picture it. This is a world away from the comforts of his banking job. There's mud that swallows your boots up to the ankle, freezing rain that whips your face, and endless grueling climbs through thick bamboo forests. But it's here, in the wet clay of the Aberdares, that Joshua realizes something crucial. His body, so used to an office chair, can endure far more discomfort than he ever imagined. December 2014. The stakes get higher. Joshua decides to challenge the very giant that captivated him 2 years before. The target, Uhuru Peak, the highest point on Kilimanjaro, at an altitude of 5,895 meters. This is the real deal. Above 5,000 meters, the air becomes treacherously thin. Your lungs work like bellows, trying to suck oxygen out of the thin air, and your heart hammers against your ribs, screaming danger. This is where most newcomers break, either mentally or physically, turning back at the first signs of hypoxia. But Joshua just keeps going, one foot in front of the other. And in that critical moment, it's not the polished manager from KCB Bank who digs deep. It's that kid from the farm in Nandi. His family had always said it. Out of the 4 brothers, Joshua was the only one who never shied away from hard, monotonous physical work. Now, that farmer's grit, that habit of working until you're drenched in sweat without a single complaint, transforms into a unique kind of mountaineering endurance. He grits his teeth and pushes his way to the summit, step by agonizing step, ignoring every protest from his body. When he finally stands on the roof of Africa, gazing down at the clouds far below, something inside him changes forever. Successfully climbing Kilimanjaro seals his fate. Mountaineering is no longer just a weekend hobby. Joshua understands that his body is a machine built for the climb, and for him, an altitude of 5,895 meters isn't the finish line. It's just the launch pad for a leap into the true abyss. He stops walking, he starts running. Starting in 2015, Joshua completely rewrites the rulebook. Instead of the traditional, slow acclimatization, where every step is meticulously planned, he banks on aggressive speed. His logic is simple and rational. The less time you spend where the air is thin, the less damage your body takes. He turns mountaineering into a race for survival, where his main opponent isn't the mountain, but the clock. Mount Kenya, standing at 5,199 meters, becomes his personal training ground. For most people, it's the expedition of a lifetime. For him, it's a workout before breakfast. He's summited it more than 20 times, turning its sacred slopes into his personal treadmill. On the Siraman route, he accomplishes something that the average person can barely comprehend. He runs the route from the Old Moses Gate to Lenana Peak in just 2 hours and 56 minutes. Let that sink in. Most tourists take days to cover that same ground, sleeping in tents and battling altitude sickness. Joshua flies through it in the time it takes to watch a movie. He moves so fast, hypoxia simply can't catch him. But that's not enough for him. He needs to find the edge. One day, he pulls off an insane marathon, 3 consecutive ascents of Lenana Peak in under 24 hours. Up, then down. Up, then down. And one more time, up. His muscles are screaming with lactic acid, turning to stone. His knees ache from the constant pounding of the descents. But his mind is a cold, calculating machine. He's testing his endurance the way an engineer redlines an engine, pushing it to its absolute limit. Kilimanjaro, the very mountain that first captivated him, now becomes the stage for him to showcase his superhuman abilities. A standard expedition takes 5 to 6 days, the time needed for the body to adapt to the altitude. Joshua shatters that notion. He completes the entire round trip, to the summit and back down, in just 15 hours. Imagine the shock of the other climbers, gasping for air and leaning on their poles, only to see a shadow blur past them. They spend a week chasing that summit. He does it in a single day. For this wild, untamed energy, this refusal to play by the rules, his friends give him a nickname, the Maverick Mountaineer, a lone wolf, a rebel. He's no longer just a banker or an athlete. He's an outsider, in the best sense of the word. A man who operates in his own reality, where speed is the only thing that guarantees survival. Africa becomes too small for him. Joshua's ambitions spill beyond the continent, and he begins to hunt for pain on a global stage. The year is 2019, the place, Italy. He's at the starting line of the Tour de Géant, the Tour of Giants. It's a 356-kilometer race with a total elevation gain of 27,000 meters. To put that in perspective, imagine climbing Mount Everest 3 times, but without stopping for sleep or food. His muscles are on fire, his mind teetering on the brink of exhaustion-fueled hallucinations. But he crosses the finish line. He endures. The experience is so profound, it compels Joshua to write a book. He calls it A History of the Ultramarathon, and this is where his incredible, almost fanatical, grounded nature really shines through. When the first copies are printed, he doesn't hire a delivery service. He hand-delivers the first 300 copies himself, just so he can look the people who share his passion right in the eye. His world expands at a terrifying pace. Thailand, the jungles of Chiang Mai. He snags second place overall in a 160-kilometer race, where the air is so humid you could practically drink it. The rocky cliffs of Cappadocia, Turkey, the cold forests of Poland. He finishes. Every single time, his body becomes a perfect machine, converting oxygen into pure energy. He builds a colossal, elite-level aerobic base, the kind of engine an Olympian would kill for. But it's right here, in the shadow of his triumphs, that a deadly trap begins to form. Joshua starts to believe that this super-endurance is his armor. It's a classic case of survivorship bias. He fails to see that the ability to run for 30 hours straight at sea level and the ability to survive in the death zone are two completely different universes. Running trains the heart, sure, but it doesn't train the brain to function when the oxygen in your blood drops to critical levels. His incredible physical conditioning masks his vulnerability to hypoxia, creating a dangerous illusion of invincibility. September 2023. The scenery changes dramatically. Gone are the green forests of Europe and the hot trails of Thailand. In their place, the gray, lifeless skies of Nepal. Joshua is stepping up to the big leagues. Before him lies Manaslu, the mountain of the spirit, the 8th highest peak in the world, soaring to 8,163 meters. Here, the air is so thin, you have to fight the atmosphere for every single breath. But Joshua decides to go all in. He refuses to use supplemental oxygen. What's more, he forgoes a personal Sherpa guide. He wants a fair fight, just him, one-on-one with the mountain, and on the surface, it looks like an absolute triumph. On September 24th, he stands on the summit. He makes history, becoming the first African to summit an 8,000er without supplemental oxygen. It's his moment of glory. The euphoria floods his system, silencing the warning bells from his own body. This success becomes the fuel that cements a dangerous idea in his mind. Everest without oxygen. It's possible. But if you look at the medical reports from the expedition, the triumph looks more like a chronicle of survival. Manaslu doesn't just let him reach her summit. She gives him a warning, a black spot, that he tragically ignores. During the expedition, Joshua experiences symptoms of HAPE, high-altitude pulmonary edema, not once, but twice. His legendary speed, the speed he was so proud of on Kilimanjaro, is nowhere to be found. The hypoxia turns this elite athlete into a frail old man. Instead of a swift final push, he crawls upward for 14 agonizing hours. He would later admit, "I have never felt so slow in my entire life." His body is screaming at him that it isn't built for the death zone, and this is where he makes a fatal error in judgment. Medically speaking, getting high-altitude pulmonary edema twice on Manaslu, that's a massive red flag. It's a biological stop sign, screaming that you're genetically wired to not handle the altitude. But Joshua's a fighter. He doesn't see it as a physical limitation, but as just another test of will, one he'd already passed. He thinks, "I did it then, I can do it now." He survived. And paradoxically, the very fact that he made it out alive becomes his death sentence, because now his sights are set on the ultimate prize, Everest. For Joshua, that rubber mask on his face during the summit push isn't a lifeline. It's a wall between him and the truth. He looks at the oxygen canisters used by 97% of climbers on the world's highest mountain and sees only one thing, a cheat that steals the altitude, lessening its impact on the body, and cheapens the entire athletic achievement. He chooses the hard way. Everest without oxygen. He studies the death rate for no oxygen ascents to 8,848 meters, where the odds of dying skyrocket. And he treats it all like a complex financial report that requires some serious risk hedging. Joshua creates a safety plan that reads like a legal contract. The key figure in this contract is his shadow, guide Nawang Sherpa. Nawang is carrying the panic button, a single oxygen canister meant only for an emergency evacuation. And Joshua spells out the conditions for its use with chilling precision. He calls one of the clauses, "Go bananas." He knows exactly how high-altitude cerebral edema, or HACE, works in the death zone. He knows that when the brain begins to swell, pressing against the inside of the skull, reality itself starts to fracture. You become aggressive, irrational, completely disconnected from reality. If he starts to go bananas on the slopes of Everest, Nawang has to step in. There are other triggers too. The oxygen has to be used if he passes out, or if he blows past his strict time limit and gets stranded, or if he simply hits a biological wall, admitting, as he writes in his own notes, "I am not Superman." He's also preparing for Everest's brutal cold. Without supplemental oxygen, your blood thickens. And to save your vital organs, your body just stops sending heat to your limbs. Fingers can freeze solid in minutes. So, Joshua gears up like a cyborg. Electrically heated gloves, mittens with extra battery packs, and heated socks. He's confident he's planned for every possibility in his encounter with the greatest mountain on Earth. April 2024. But instead of a swift start, he hits a dead end. Joshua touches down in Kathmandu, fired up to take on the world's highest peak, as part of an expedition with industry giant Seven Summit Treks. He's supported by Nawang Sherpa, a seasoned guide whose job is to be both his shadow and his guardian angel. But the schedule, planned with the precision of a Swiss watch, starts to unravel before the climb even begins. Nepal greets them with a wall of fog. The flight to Lukla, the gateway to Everest, is cancelled. Visibility, 0. Joshua loses 2 precious days stuck in limbo, burning nervous energy instead of calories. The clock is ticking, and he hasn't even set foot on the ice. When the helicopter finally drops him at Everest Base Camp, the grueling routine of acclimatization begins. At 5,364 meters, life itself feels surreal. Joshua describes the conditions as pretty luxurious. Hot meals, internet access, comfortable tents. But it's a gilded cage. His body immediately rebels against the hostile environment. The kumbu cough sets in. Joshua struggles to breathe. His throat is on fire, and his lungs protest every single gulp of the dry, dusty air. But what's worse than the physical pain is the torture of inaction. Everest is completely socked in by clouds, and the expedition is on hold. For a man like Joshua, used to the fast pace of corporate deal-making, just sitting around staring at his tent, it's unbearable. He calls it bad for business. He can feel his investment in himself going to waste, the peak physical condition he's built over years of training just slipping away. The waiting is more draining mentally than any physical challenge. To get back a sense of control, he gives himself an ultimatum. He sets a date, Wednesday, May 22nd. This is his deadline. By that day, he won't just summit the top of the world. He'll be all the way back down and safe. He draws that finish line in his mind, refusing to even consider the possibility of failure. He records a video diary, saying he's ready despite the cough and the delays, trying to convince the world, and maybe himself. Wednesday, May 22nd, the date is locked in. He set his own appointment with destiny, never suspecting that Everest would take that challenge literally. May 21st, summit night. Camp 4 on the South Col at 7,925 meters. This is the last patch of solid ground before the void, a desolate, windswept moonscape where oxygen levels plummet to critical lows. Here, on the edge of the stratosphere, Joshua Cheruiyot Kirui and Nawang Sherpa step out of their tent and into the inky blackness. And in that moment, the gulf between them is immense. Nawang is breathing through a mask, taking in a life-giving stream of oxygen. Joshua, on the other hand, has willingly refused that same protection. He's taking a step into the void, relying on nothing but his own lungs and that philosophy of speed that has worked for him in the past. But on this night, Everest isn't just a mountain. It's a place of tragedy. The atmosphere on the slope is electric with fear. Just 24 hours earlier, on a nearby section of the mountain, a collapsing snow cornice had already claimed the lives of a British climber, Daniel Patterson, and his guide. The trail is unstable, the snow underfoot feels treacherous, and everyone's nerves are frayed. Making matters worse is the traffic. A line of headlamps snakes up the narrow, icy ridge. A traffic jam. For a climber on bottled oxygen, it's an annoyance, a waste of time. But for Joshua, climbing without it, any stop, any delay, is a potential death sentence. Without constant movement, his blood begins to cool at an alarming rate. Warmth drains from his limbs one by one. And with every minute he stands still, hypoxia tightens its grip. He's forced to wait for others to pass, and with every passing moment, his precious body heat bleeds out into the freezing night. Cutting through the chaos and the cold, a digital signal breaks through. The last artifact Joshua leaves for the world of the living. He sends his family a short video message. On screen, he looks composed, determined. His voice cuts through the static of the wind, telling them he's about 800 feet. That's around 240 meters from the summit. He says it's just one last push. To someone watching at sea level, the distance sounds almost ridiculous, a 10-minute jog. But up here, in the death zone, those feet stretch into an eternity. This video becomes his final goodbye, though he doesn't know it yet. He looks into the camera with hope, convinced the worst is behind him, that the summit is just a matter of time. His mother, receiving the file, watches the screen with bated breath, praying for her son to come home. But then, the signal cuts out. Joshua puts his phone away and continues his ascent, stepping toward the point of no return, where his willpower is about to collide with biological reality. The hours between that video and the next radio call will prove to be fatal. Those last few feet that Joshua spoke of with such hope, they're turning into an infinity. The pace slows to a crawl, thanks to the human traffic jam on the narrow ridge. And for a body starved of oxygen, stopping is the beginning of the end. The cold seeps through even his heated gear, but the most terrifying thing isn't happening to his body. It's happening to his mind. Hypoxia is insidious. It doesn't cause pain. It just slowly extinguishes the light of consciousness. First comes euphoria, then tunnel vision. And then reality itself begins to crumble. By the time Joshua reaches Bishop Rock at 8,810 meters, he is no longer the same man who recorded that video. The voice of Nawang Sherpa crackles over the radio at base camp, but there's no triumph in his tone, only panic. The guide issues a distress call. The client is exhibiting abnormal behavior. What Kirui feared most is happening. His Go Bananas protocol is activated, but there's no one left to follow it. Joshua himself is a prisoner of high-altitude cerebral edema, or HACE. It's a condition that robs you of the ability to think clearly. He's physically resisting his own rescue. When Nawang tries to give him oxygen from an emergency bottle, Joshua refuses. Still, Nawang Sherpa tries again and again to do his job. He brings the mask to his client's face. The rubber touches frostbitten skin, but Joshua's reaction is instant and aggressive. He physically shoves the guide away. In his inflamed, oxygen-starved brain, the mask isn't a source of life. It's a threat, an attempt to break his will, to limit his freedom. The hands that were signing bank documents just yesterday are now lashing out with surprising strength, striking at his rescuer. And this is where a terrifying medical term comes into play: anosognosia. It's the complete inability to perceive your own illness. Joshua has no idea that he's dying. On the contrary, the paradoxical chemistry of an oxygen-starved brain can grant a delusional sense of invincibility. He genuinely believes he can keep going, that the summit is right there, and this pesky Sherpa is the only thing stopping him from making history. He pushes away the very oxygen that could clear his mind in a matter of minutes, condemning himself to an irreversible descent into darkness. Nawang is trapped. There's no way out. He's standing on a precarious ledge, at risk of being shoved into the abyss by his own client. The radio crackles in his ear, a lifeline to the world of the living. But right now, that voice is only making the nightmare worse. Base camp sees the data, the reports, but they can't feel the icy grip of death up here. The voice on the radio isn't giving a hard order. Leave him and save yourself. Instead, it's a plea. Keep trying to talk him down. These distant voices are asking for the impossible, to reason with a man who has already lost his mind. Nawang looks at Joshua, then down into the bottomless abyss of the Kangshung face, and he knows. Their time is up. He stays put, honoring the request from base camp, even as every fiber of his being screams at him to run. The drama hits its peak at a point with zero room to maneuver, where a single wrong move could send them both on a 2-kilometer plunge. Around 8:30 in the morning, the drama on the radio is replaced by a silent, visual horror. A climber, John Mills, making his way along the ridge, stumbles upon the aftermath of this tragedy. This isn't just an accident scene. It's a frozen tableau, like a Greek tragedy staged in a theater of ice. At the foot of Bishop Rock, Mills spots Joshua. The banker who dreamed of triumph is now contorted in an unnatural, broken heap. He's not on the trail, but just off to the side, in a shallow hollow, as if he'd been swept there, or had slid into it unconsciously. It's not a deep crevasse, but it's definitely not the way up. In this tangle of gear and limbs, there is no ambition left, no struggle. Joshua is no longer fighting. His war with the mountain is over. But the real horror isn't the body of the client. It's the figure of the guide, sitting right beside him. Nawang Sherpa didn't leave. He's sitting next to Kirui, upright, like a sentry at his post. From a distance, it looks like he's just taking a break, catching his breath. But when Mills gets closer and looks into his face, he sees nothing. Nawang's eyes are open. They're staring out at the horizon, at the endless white of the Himalayas, but they see nothing. He's completely catatonic. Mills shouts right in his face, trying to break through. He's screaming, desperate for any reaction, a movement, even just a blink. But Nawang remains motionless, as if carved from the very rock he's sitting on. By now, the familiar hiss of his oxygen tank, that rhythmic sound of life, had fallen silent. At this point, Nawang's oxygen supply had almost certainly run out. He'd used it all up, staying by his client's side, in a futile attempt to save a man who was past saving. He didn't abandon Kirui when he lost his grip on reality. He didn't leave when base camp urged him to keep trying. Nawang stayed put on the ridge, holding his ground, buying time, as his own strength drained away. In that moment, he was no longer a guide. He became a fixed point on the mountainside, a silent testament to professional duty, pushed to its absolute limit. At around 8,810 meters, life was slowly ebbing away. All that remained was the wind. And two men, frozen in time. The radio traffic becomes a graveyard. After noon on May 22nd, the frequency that had been crackling with panicked messages just moments before falls silent. The human voice is replaced by static, a white noise that can only mean one of two things. Either the batteries are dead, or there's no one left to speak. Base camp is plunged into a heavy, agonizing wait. But the mountain doesn't give back those it takes. Contact with the team is lost for good. A rescue operation begins, under conditions where hope itself seems to defy logic. A team of Sherpa rescuers starts the ascent, heading up into the death zone, their headlamps slicing through the darkness. Their lungs are burning, their oxygen masks frosting over. They aren't searching for glory. They're looking for signs of a disaster. And they do. The timeline blurs somewhere between the late evening of May 22nd and the early morning of the 23rd. A headlamp beam cuts through the dark, catching a flash of bright gear. It's Joshua, but he's no longer where John Mills last saw him. His body is found further down the slope, in a deep crevasse, a fissure in the ice where it seems he was swept after a final fall. This is where his journey ends. The altimeter reads around 8,800 meters. He was just 48 meters from the summit, the very goal he had trained his lungs for decades. The length of an Olympic swimming pool, a distance a healthy person could walk in a minute, had become, up here, an impossible infinity. But as the rescuers examine the scene, a new kind of chill runs down their spines. There's no one else there. Nawang Sherpa, the motionless sentinel that John Mills had seen just hours before, was gone. The icy ridge is empty. Where he had been sitting, in that trance-like state, there is now only wind, sweeping loose snow across the ice. Nawang had vanished without a trace. No body, no pack, no oxygen bottle. The end was likely swift and silent. Disoriented, his oxygen depleted, his consciousness fading, he could have simply slipped from the ridge. One clumsy movement in that state of stupor, at an altitude of over 8,500 meters, and you fall. Hundreds, then thousands of meters down, either onto the Nepali side or the Tibetan side. He is officially declared missing, dissolved into the white silence of the mountain he could never bring himself to leave. The rescue operation is called off. On May 29th, Kirui's family in Nairobi is faced with a choice no parent should ever have to make. They are left with an equation written in the cold calculus of risk. Is one body worth the lives of the living? Recovering a body from 8,800 meters is a monumental and perilous task. To bring a frozen deadweight body down through vertical cliffs and the death zone, you'd need a team of 6 to 8 elite Sherpas, and every single one of them would be risking a fatal fall or death from cerebral edema, all to bring back an empty shell. Faced with this reality, the family makes a heartbreaking decision. Joshua will stay on the mountain. He becomes one with the mountain he so desperately wanted to conquer. He is now part of the eternal landscape, one of those sleeping guardians of Everest that future expeditions will pass by. The climbing community, shaken by the drama, even suggests memorializing him right on the map. There's even a proposal to name this fatal stretch of the ridge Cheruiyot Point, in honor of the man who got there on sheer willpower, but paid the ultimate price. While Joshua's body is slowly turning into a monument in the icy winds of Everest, a surreal farewell is taking place in his home village of Chepterit. The air here is warm and humid. It smells of the earth. But there is no earth for Joshua. The family holds a funeral without a body. Instead of a coffin, a photograph stands at the center of the ceremony. From the portrait, a vibrant man, full of life, smiles out, while his actual body lies thousands of kilometers away, encased in eternal ice. It's a farewell to a phantom, an attempt to put a period on a sentence that was never finished. The tragedy of the situation is amplified by the noise of misinformation. While his family grieves, the internet is flooded with fake news. A video goes viral, supposedly showing a helicopter heroically evacuating Kirui's body from the summit. The clip racks up thousands of views, offering false hope and causing confusion. But it's a digital lie. The laws of physics are unforgiving. At that altitude, the air is far too thin for a helicopter to hover and maneuver with a heavy load. The family is forced to officially debunk the myth. There was no miraculous rescue. Joshua is still up there. And finally, there's the cold, hard official record. Did he achieve his dream? The history of mountaineering has no room for what-ifs. Since his body was found 48 meters below the peak, and with no photographic proof from the top, the official verdict is harsh: summit not reached. He made it 99.9% of the way, but those last few vertical meters became an insurmountable wall between him and immortality. He almost touched the sky, but the sky refused him. When the wind dies down, the tragedy reveals another chasm, a chasm of attention. Joshua's death makes global headlines. His name is heard in reports from London to Nairobi, but Nawang Sherpa, the man who gave his life for another's dream, remains invisible. He vanishes from the media spotlight as quietly as he vanished from the mountainside, becoming just another shadow in the history of commercial climbing. But there is one person who refuses to let him be forgotten. John Mills, the sole witness to the final act of this drama, nominates the missing guide for the George Cross, the highest civilian award for courage. He is demanding recognition for a man who put his duty above his own survival instinct, who stayed to hold the hand of someone who could no longer even comprehend the sacrifice. Back in Kenya, grief is giving way to a fierce pride. Joshua has become a symbol, one who shattered stereotypes. He proved that African mountaineering is ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's elite. His daring has ignited a fire in his fellow countrymen. Now, in Nairobi, thousands of eyes are looking not just at the running tracks, but up, towards the icy peaks. But the price for proving this point was the ultimate one. All that's left of the ambitious Project 2024 are digital echoes. A prophetic Instagram post detailing his lights-out plan, which came true with chilling precision, and a book on the suffering of ultramarathons that has now become his testament. In the end, his own words became his epitaph. Joshua Cheruiyot Kirui, just as he promised, took his step into the darkness. He found the darkness he was searching for, and it embraced him. He didn't just conquer the summit, he became a part of it. Now, the silence at 8,800 meters is his eternal home, and he will forever remain on the mountain he loved more than life itself. Joshua made his choice consciously, refusing to use oxygen. Nawang Sherpa didn't make a choice. He was just doing his job. And this is where the story confronts its most difficult question. Where does a guide's responsibility end when a client is consciously walking to their death? And can professional duty ever truly override the basic instinct for self-preservation?